I know his brother up in Alaska, so yeah, we're making friends all over the place. Appreciate the opportunity to join you this morning at your annual Marine Mammal Commission meeting. I think this is a great opportunity to gather together folks within our federal agencies. We've got scientists, I know. We have representatives from our Alaska Native organizations, as well as industry. Everyone coming together to talk about the policies that surround marine mammal management. For us in Alaska, and as was mentioned, the future of the Arctic is really key. It is paramount. We are seeing changes within the region. We see them with our own eyes. As a lawmaker, I have an opportunity to travel extensively around the state. So what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing, this is not a matter of speculation as far as I'm concerned. We are clearly seeing changes in the Arctic and at an accelerated rate. So not only are we seeing changes in the Arctic as Alaskans, but we're also seeing the level of interest by non-Alaskans really step up as a consequence of what is happening in the north. I'd like to take just a quick moment to welcome the Alaskans that we have present. Vera Metcalf on the Eskimo Walrus Commission, Mike Miller, the Indigenous Peoples Commission on Marine Mammals. We've got Willie Goodwin, Chairman of the Arctic Marine Mammal Coalition, Peggy Osterbach with the Aleut Marine Mammal Commission, and Robert Sudam with the North Slope Borough. It takes an effort to get here from there, so I appreciate the travel, the commitment to these issues. A couple weeks ago, I was up in the state, springtime in Alaska right now, and I had the opportunity to go out to Point Hope. For those of you that are not familiar with Point Hope, it is high north, sitting there on the top of the state, right about that knuckle area right there. I was there to visit not only with a high school friend of mine, but her husband is one of the whaling captains there in Point Hope. Now, the fact that he also happens to be the CEO of a Fortune 500 Alaska Native corporation makes the story all that much more interesting. But I was there trying to time it at the point where I could participate in the annual spring whale hunt. I've had an opportunity to be out on the ice before, and I can tell you, as a born and raised Alaskan, as one who has seen some amazing things in my state, there is nothing like being out on the rough and jumble ice, feeling like you are the only person on planet Earth, feeling a little vulnerable and exposed, knowing that behind all the jumble of the ice ridges, you've got polar bear that are wandering around looking for something interesting, and you hope that interesting thing isn't you. You've got just the threat of ice as it breaks up and moves out. The day that we were out there was a strong wind coming out of the north, and that was viewed as a very good thing because it was going to be pushing the rotting ice away and allowing the lead to open up more quickly. But as it was described to me by the elders and by the young men, quickly can be dangerous. This is, being on the ice is not a stroll. Being on the ice is a dangerous place at times. And so being aware of your surroundings and knowing and understanding the ice and being able to read the colors of the ice and where the ridges are and what they mean is really a matter of survival in many, many cases. And so you develop, or you appreciate, the sense of awareness that is perhaps unlike anything that we see in a city, an awareness of your surrounding. When the Eskimo people, when the Inupiaq say, that they can sense changes through the smell and not just the sight but all senses. It is truly a reminder that our native people are truly our first scientists, and perhaps our best scientists. So I had an opportunity to observe so much as the family was preparing to go out on the hunt. And it's everybody that prepares. We're sitting in a tiny living room, and the whaling captain is on his cell phone, on his iPhone, contacting all of the young people, letting them know we need to be ready to go. His wife, my high school friend, is in the kitchen, and at the kitchen table she's simultaneously making caribou stew and fry bread and sewing the covers that each on the whaling boat will wear, the white covers that they go out. All this is happening simultaneously. The son of the whaling captain is the harpooner, and he brings the harpoon into the living room. The handle is a big long stick of driftwood, and he cuts a piece of sandpaper in half, and he gives half to his 5-year-old son, and he takes the other half, and they sand the wood of the harpoon. I said, well, why are they doing that? Is this a new harpoon? No, it's to cleanse the tool. Everything that was being prepared for, there was some aspect of tradition or cultural or spiritual. Before that boat was moved out onto the ice, the entire family and the crew gathered around to say a prayer. Nothing happens without the prayer and the blessing for safety, the prayer that the animal gives himself up. I go on about this experience because I think it's important that as we who are thousands of miles away, who will perhaps never understand why a people in this day and age would engage in a whale hunt. It's not just about the food, although how they share the whale that they caught 2 days after I left, how they share it, but how it is truly part of who they are as a community, who they are as a family, their connection to the earth, to the water, to the air. It's something that's difficult to describe back here in Washington, D.C. And so I feel it's important to share my observations, because being on this ice, which it was spiritual, it was grounding, and it reminds me that the work that we do here in Washington is not solely the management of a species, because that makes it sound so technical and impersonal. It's honoring and respecting the spiritual and the cultural identity of people who call the Arctic home and who have called it home for thousands of years. And it's not just the whale that we're talking about, it's the other mammals that are hunted. The walrus, the polar bear, the seals, the belugas, the sea otters, all these have sustained these people for millennia. And so what we see through the Bering Straits, we see one of the largest migrations of marine mammals from the Pacific to the Arctic. Migrations that have really provided a source of wealth in the sense of food and sustenance, but also spirituality and a sense of being. And this is for not only our Inupiat communities, but our Siberian Yupik and the Yupik further to the south. With the enactment of the Marine Mammal Protection Act and the Endangered Species Act, our Alaska Native communities saw within one generation the imposition of a federal legal and regulatory framework. It was basically coming in to tell them what to do after they have been doing these things for generations, telling them how to sustainably manage marine mammals. And all you need to do is sit down and talk with the elder in the Rock family, Elijah Rock, who is 78, 79 years old. And you want to hear good management practices, good conservation practices. That elder will tell you that this is not something that they need to learn through regulation. They have been practicing it there in Point Hope and other whaling communities for forever. I look at where we are with the federal framework, and I'm afraid, I feel, that we're at a place where we're not always taking into account the Native people's cultural knowledge or the unique characteristics of the state. While the right of Alaska Natives in the position to hunt marine mammals is recognized through the MMPA and through the ESA, regulatory actions by our federal agencies continue to put Alaska Natives in this position of having to explain their culture to Western managers, again, thousands of miles away. We see what the Native people believe to be very heavy-handed enforcement, resulting in a push where these communities are saying, we're not going to put up with, we don't want to take on these issues that we feel threatened, we feel intimidated, and so we're seeing an erosion of their traditional and their customary practices. So I'd like to move from some of the more emotional and passionate side of this discussion and how Alaskans relate to that. You obviously have some serious topics on your agenda today. I understand that the meetings during the past 2 days have covered the issues of significance for Alaska, including the Arctic and offshore oil and gas activities, both issues where we have an interplay between our extensive federal agency activities and the people up north. There's a lot of uncertainty, as you all know, regarding oil and gas development in the Arctic, and this certainly has significant effect on our coastal communities. But it's not just about a concern for what may or may not happen with oil and gas exploration. As I was in Point Hope, as I was in Kotzebue during that same week, the concern really seems to be so much more focused on what we're seeing with the increase in marine traffic coming down through the Bering Straits and the implications that may have for subsistence hunting activities, not only from the perspective of safety on the water, but the potential impacts if we have some kind of a marine casualty. In many ways, the management and the conservation of marine mammals, I think, will play a central role in how the development issues are going to be addressed and be resolved. So I encourage the Marine Mammal Commission to approach these issues with an appreciation that things are different in Alaska. We say this all the time, but we really need to have that understood, that solutions require not just consultation, not just collaboration, but meaningful consultation and collaboration with the local stakeholders. And this has to include an active dialogue with the Arctic Marine Mammal Coalition, which is taking the lead on behalf of their regional hunter and co-management groups. I know, again, that these groups have representatives here this week, and I hope that the federal agencies are receptive to your input. I think that the federal agencies are trying to do a better job to incorporate traditional knowledge into the resource management decisions. I know that BOEM and NOAA are really working with our Alaska Native communities to try to achieve this goal. But I think we can always do more. We can always really work to try to understand truly what that traditional knowledge is, referring to the body of evolving practical knowledge based on observations, personal experience of local residents over an extensive, multi-generational time period. It sounds pretty simple to me. Now, there are some strong precedents in federal law that codify the very unique role of Alaska Natives in this area, including the MMPA, the co-management authority in Section 119 of the EPA has ensured that our Alaska Native communities and our organizations are directly involved in the decisions that impact the management of our marine resources, including partnering with NOAA to manage the bowhead whale harvest. The Alaska Eskimo Whaling Commission, of course, also works directly with the oil and gas industry to produce conflict avoidance agreements, which help, again, to coordinate on-water activities, reduce adverse interactions. And I recognize that this process is largely focused on marine logistics, but the heart of the CAA is about the exchange of information by groups and individuals that I think have some pretty distinct perspectives. And so I think it's a useful example here of how we can bridge gaps and perhaps build some more productive working relationships. Because again, it's key, it's essential that our scientific community broaden its engagement with the indigenous communities in the Arctic from the outset of our research initiatives, and really then to go further and communicate the findings and conclusions. It is my understanding that NOAA is working with the Alaska Native communities as it's developing its marine mammal disaster response plan. I think we all would agree that nobody wants to have to implement such a plan, but we have to be prepared in the event that there is a marine casualty or another incident that requires a significant federal response. It's just essential to have one. Early in the process, NOAA learned a major difference for marine mammal management in Alaska. One of the highest community priorities is food security. I hear that time and time and time again. It comes down to, when it comes to our indigenous peoples of the North, it comes down to ensuring that there is a level of food security. And unlike perhaps anywhere else in the country, if there is a problem with marine mammals in Alaska, it immediately becomes a problem for the affected communities in their ability to feed themselves. So I hope that the early lessons that were learned by NOAA in this context will then translate into effective procedures going forward to help our communities. I can't conclude, and I know that I've kind of overstayed my comments here, but I think it is important to recognize that we are still dealing with some frustrations between our Native peoples and our federal agencies. We've made some good headway with Fish and Wildlife Service over the definition of significantly altered as it applies to native handicrafts related to the legal harvest of sea otters. IPCOM, Sea Alaska, I was very engaged with it. Congressman Young, Senator Begich, Governor Parnell, working together, I think we were able to really make advances and ultimately address this. But it was frustrating because I think it took a lot longer than folks would have hoped for on what they believed was a somewhat minor issue. Currently, we've got some problems with the efforts of the Nanook Commission to more fully engage in its co-management role with Fish and Wildlife Service. I think, unfortunately, there will be more. It is an ongoing challenge to ensure that our federal agencies, again, understand that they connect and that they are responsive to our Native constituency. So we'll continue to work on that front. Many of you in the room know our former North Slope Borough Mayor, Edward Ida, a man who is able to summarize in an amazingly succinct and poetic way some of the challenges that our Native peoples state. But he made a comment on the challenges faced by the communities along the Chukchi and the Beaufort coast. And he said that what matters in this debate is that our views and concerns are taken into account. We need to be heard because our perspective is fundamentally different from that of the warring parties. We aren't just staking a claim to the Arctic. We are part of it, and we always will be. We need to keep those wise words in mind. So with that, I thank you for your time this morning. I commend you all for the work that you are doing in